Long and lazy, the Ouachita River flows through the heart of West Monroe, Louisiana, and into many different lives.
We were blessed with a beautiful body of water, wasn't we? I'm telling you.
But when a promising young academic disappears,
was she involved with the student?
the only thing moving fast in this southern town is suspicion.
I sure wouldn't want to be in her husband's shoes right now.
And now, these quiet waters may never run the same again. If there's one thing a freshman at Louisiana Tech can count on, it's the guiding hand of Dean Edward Jacobs. It's a blissful life in the ivory tower with so many wonderful colleagues, like the pride and joy of the English department, Professor Stephanie Pepper Sims.
She was a small person, but what she lacked in stature, she made up for in intellectual energy and just a great personality.
Stephanie is not only clever and petite, she's punctual. So it's quite a surprise when she doesn't show up to teach Monday morning composition.
It was very atypical of Stephanie not to be where she was supposed to be, when she was supposed to be there.
It's not just the university that's marked her absent. Her worried parents haven't heard from Stephanie in over 24 hours. They immediately file a missing persons report with West Monroe detective Jeff Terrell.
They were really close to their daughter, their only child, and they spoke to each other every day.
The Peppers are frantic, but Detective Terrell isn't one to jump the gun. Missing person cases often have the simplest of explanations.
Usually within a day or so, they turn up or we find out where they're at. And most of the time, when you start getting into it, they've gone somewhere.
So where has Miss Sims run off to? There's a world of possibilities wider than the Ouachita, and each one must be investigated.
We checked the airlines, the taxi services, the bus lines. There was no activity on any of her credit cards, any of her checking accounts, no activity on her cell phone.
And right across the river, everyone has a theory about this pretty young prof.
I've heard being a professor can be really stressful sometimes, so maybe she just decided to take a break, get away, not tell anybody.
Maybe she met someone handsome and fell in love and they went to Mexico. You never know. Love makes you do crazy things.
Is Stephanie just laying low, or are the Peppers' worries well-founded? Detectives race to Stephanie's apartment to find out for themselves. And right there in the parking lot, they make a chilling discovery.
Her car was still at her apartment. So she had to leave with somebody.
But who? Perhaps the answer lies inside.
Everything appeared normal. The only thing missing was Stephanie's car keys and her purse from the kitchen, which is where she normally keeps it. There was no forced entry into any of the windows, the doors. There was no weapon anywhere in the apartment. There was no obvious signs of any type of a struggle. We sprayed luminol throughout the apartment, and we didn't find anything.
Stephanie's pad is as spotless as her attendance record. But investigators do make one intriguing find inside this academic's abode.
We did find some .25 caliber bullets.
And where was that at?
They were inside the closet.
Howard Pepper told us that he had purchased a handgun for Stephanie, and he said it was a .25 caliber Lorson.
But Stephanie's prized pistol has mysteriously vanished from the apartment.
We're missing a weapon at this point. We searched the car. It's not in a car, so something's happened to the weapon. So.
With a missing gun added to this missing persons case, investigators know there's no time to lose.
The next thing's going to be talking to some of her close friends, see who she was with last, and go from there.
As word gets around town that Stephanie has gone missing, locals like Susan and CJ can't help but put two and two together.
The police always say usually in situations like this, it always comes back to the husband or the ex or, you know, that's the first thing they think about.
Well, it makes perfect sense that they would think that because
I know.
9 times out of 10, that's what happens.
Statistically, that's what they're saying.
I sure wouldn't want to be in her husband's shoes right now.
Stephanie is estranged from her husband, David Sims. But when he's brought in for questioning, David shockingly reveals that he and Stephanie were together the day she disappeared.
David Sims' admission, he sees Stephanie Sunday morning, and he says she returns home at about lunchtime.
Just what were these two old lovebirds up to that Sunday morning? Was David Sims looking to patch things up with his wife? Or did he have something else in mind? It's game day at Louisiana Tech, and everyone's got their colors on.
Like, squish it between your fingers.
But some students are a different shade of blue over the disappearance of English professor Stephanie Pepper Sims.
I don't know, man. They said she didn't show up for class. Wow. She might have skipped town or something, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. She's always in class on time, every day.
Yeah.
Think someone could have, like, kidnapped her or something?
Yeah, I guess. That kind of thing never really happens around here. For sure, dude.
Investigators have focused their interest on Stephanie's estranged husband, David Sims.
We interviewed David Sims on at least 3 different occasions. He told us that he called Stephanie that morning at home, that she came to David's house. From there, they went to a sit-go, and from there, they came back to David's house, and then from there, Stephanie drove home by herself.
And there's proof.
These are the pictures that back it up. This is Stephanie Sims at the convenience store. This is actually their car. They were in her vehicle. We eventually actually gave David Sims a lie detector test, which he passed. Everything that he told us, we were able to verify. He never lied to us about anything.
Honest David is off the hook, but the rumors continue to trickle downstream. So it's time for detectives to check out the source.
One of the things that we looked at was her job there as a associate professor at Tech. Now, our main purpose of going there was to try to learn more about Stephanie.
And detectives may be on the right track, as rumors fly faster than the chess pieces down at student hangout, the Frothy Monkey.
Was she involved with the student, or was that a possibility at all?
I mean, it happens.
It would be terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small town. You would think someone would have seen them together.
Yeah. It makes me feel like this town is not as honest as I thought it was.
That's certainly something worth checking out. Detectives comb the campus for any sign of a major beef with this petite prof.
She was young, she was pretty. It's always a possibility that maybe a student had a crush on her or something. Maybe somebody wasn't happy with a grade they'd gotten. You never know.
But these rumors turn out to be little more than a greasy southern breakfast. You'll get lots of sizzle, but very little sustenance. It seems Stephanie was loved by all.
And we couldn't find anybody at the university, student, faculty, anybody that wanted to harm her or had a problem with her even. Just, you know, another dead end for us.
As days turn into weeks, the mood on campus grows grim. And grad students like Rebecca May can't help but fear the worst.
I kind of had this romantic notion that maybe she had fled and she was living some, you know, glorious life somewhere, but you always know in the back of your mind that that's probably not the case.
And with each passing day, the chances for a happy ending diminish.
If you have a missing person, you want to find them as soon as possible, because the longer it goes without finding them, the more likely it is that something bad has happened to them.
The search continues, but now investigators must face the unthinkable.
We sent our cadaver dogs out in this wooded area right behind the apartment complex. They went all through the canal.
Gas, leave it.
Took the dog everywhere around the apartment complex looking, just to see.
But this search comes up empty as well.
There's nothing to find.
There's still no sign of Stephanie, but some headlines trickling in from the south suggest a terrifying new possibility.
Down in the area of Baton Rouge, there were several murders, women coming up missing, women coming up killed.
The Baton Rouge police are convinced they've got a serial killer on their hands. And no one can ignore the similarities to Stephanie's disappearance.
They were all female victims. There was no obvious forced entry, and there was no signs of any type of a struggle.
And some suspect this killer may be seeking fresh territory.
Everybody was terrified that he had moved his way north, and I was living in a constant fear, especially being that he targeted young women.
Could Stephanie Pepper Sims have become this madman's latest victim? It's another perfect day along the Ouachita River. But when the fish aren't biting, Todd and Rodney get to talking.
Think they'll ever find that girl?
I don't know, Todd. I don't know.
And today's topic is the potential connection between the Baton Rouge serial killer and the disappearance of Stephanie Pepper Sims.
Seems awful strange. You think he's changed places to come towards Louisiana Tech?
Maybe he thought he was gonna get caught. Had to move.
I don't know, it just gets scary.
As locals cast about different theories, Detective Terrell and his partner Major Stan Hayden meet over some cafe au lait to discuss this latest dark twist.
Have you been in contact with some of the investigators in South Louisiana that are working those cases?
I called and spoke to one of the detectives that's on the task force.
Despite the similarities between the serial killer's victims and Stephanie's disappearance, there's one major difference. It seems the Baton Rouge serial killer wants to be noticed.
We don't have a body. In all of those cases, they were finding the body.
But Stephanie still hasn't been found, dead or alive.
That's, totally different from the method of operation that the killer was using there. I don't think this is even a possibility for our case.
Everything kind of points towards someone she might have known.
With a clock ticking, detectives know the townsfolk expect results.
People don't come up missing in West Monroe. I mean, that just doesn't happen.
And their hard work is rewarded when a hot tip from one of Stephanie's closest friends develops into a promising lead.
All right, Wayne Guidry Jr.
Stephanie had a new flame.
After she separated from her husband, Stephanie had met a man by the name of Wayne Guidry Jr., and shortly after that, they got an apartment here in West Monroe, and they were living together.
Sounds pretty serious. And yet Stephanie had decided to keep this mystery bow on the down low. Not only from her husband.
As far as he knew, she was living there by herself.
But from her parents as well.
They weren't aware that he was living with her there in the apartment.
Investigators bring Wayne in for questioning.
He tells us that he'd be more than happy to speak to us. Seems like he really wants to cooperate.
And Wayne has some story to share. He tells investigators that Stephanie came home to him that Sunday afternoon, and the two had quite an evening.
He said they got into this fight. She kicks him out, so he gets his belongings, leaves the apartment, gets in her car. He drives her car around West Monroe area that night, and during this entire time, he tells us that he's tried to call her on her cell phone with his cell phone.
But when investigators check Wayne's phone records, they make a startling find.
No phone calls were made to Stephanie Sims' phone that evening from his cell phone. And we can prove it with these phone records right here. We confronted him about the phone records. He had nothing to say.
News that Wayne's at a loss for words comes as a bit of a surprise to golfing guru Matt Owens.
When I first heard about it, he was just hanging around the golf courses and was asking the guy behind the counter, did anyone want to play for money around here? Does anybody gamble?
Wayne has always been all talk and no swing.
Yeah, he always said that he was a real good golfer, and then I heard 2 or 3 people tell me he couldn't play worth crap.
I killed that one.
Wayne may have spent his days hustling on the golf course, but a forensic analysis of Stephanie's computer tells detectives just how he spent the night Stephanie disappeared.
The internet activity showed that in the early morning hours, somebody was on the internet looking at pornography, golf sites.
Porn and golf? It seems a certain someone was up all night, polishing his putter.
We know that Wayne Guidry is interested in golf, and we could assume, because he's a male, that he probably would go to the pornographic websites.
Oh, men and their toys. What won't they play with? But this time, it's not Wayne's naughty surfing that's the problem. It's the timeline he's given police about what happened that night.
Wayne Guidry had told us that he was out of the apartment at 11:45 p.m. The internet activity tells us that he's lying about not being in the apartment all that time during the early morning hours.
But without a body, there's still no evidence of a crime. And the question remains, where in the world is Stephanie Pepper Sims?
We only had one option, and that's to find Stephanie.
Coming up,
it was like a light went off. You know, that's got to be it.
A shocking twist comes from the most unlikely source of all. West Monroe ladies CJ and Susan are certain they know who's behind the disappearance of Stephanie Pepper Sims, her secret live-in boyfriend, Wayne Guidry.
Isn't it kind of strange that nobody knew anything about it or had any inkling, and all of a sudden...
I'm sure that he's already been called in for questioning.
Every time something like this comes up, it's always like it's somebody they know.
I know. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies to think that something like that would happen around here.
And those heebie-jeebies might be tough to shake. Without a body, there's not enough evidence for Detective Terrell to arrest Wayne Guidry.
You know, as far as physical evidence, we didn't have anything to prove that Stephanie was dead.
So detectives decide to take this investigation down south to Wayne's hometown.
We needed more information about Wayne Guidry. We wanted to try to contact his parents, try to contact maybe some of his friends while we're down there.
And that's where they meet Wayne Guidry Sr. He tells detectives that Junior loved to hunt in a wildlife refuge in nearby Jackson Parish.
This is a 60,000 acre plus game reserve, so it's really big. He'd hunted it for many years, really secluded, real rural, nothing but woods.
And it could be the perfect place to hide a body.
I asked Mr. Guidry if Wayne Guidry Jr. did something to Stephanie in this game reserve. Do you have any idea where he would try to put her body? He started telling us about this hole that Wayne Guidry Jr. had found in the middle of the woods. I showed him the map of the game reserve, and he kind of put an X where he was told this hole was located at by his son.
With a map in hand, detectives race back to northern Louisiana.
We're leaving, and you know, we look at each other and we go, you know, this may be something. It's over 60,000.
They organize a massive search of the area. Jackson Parish detective Scott Brown joins the team.
We had a helicopter, a lot of manpower, dog teams from the different agencies.
It doesn't take long to make a terrible discovery.
About 15 minutes into the search, we were notified that search party had in fact found the hole. About 6 foot deep. She was laying face down. She had been shot one time and drugged like a deer to a hole and dropped in it and left.
For Detective Brown, it's obvious who killed Stephanie.
I don't think he could have buried her in his own yard and been more proof that he committed the crime than to put her here.
It's a bitter end to this investigation.
Just tossed into the hole. And that's it. And that was their only daughter.
Word of Wayne's terrible deed moves quickly downriver.
This is awful. I mean, you go out one night, you meet a nice guy, and then boom, turns out to be a psychopath.
If I found out my sister was hanging out with a guy like that into both golf and porn, I'd tell her to run like hell.
Detectives finally have what they need to place Wayne Guidry Jr. under arrest.
He just didn't think we'd find her, did he?
No, he didn't. The fact that during that entire time he never even looked at us, covered his face.
Just covered his face. He knew it was up then.
Yep.
Investigators are now able to piece together Stephanie's final moments.
He lured her out to that location. Then he confronted her and told her, possibly, you either leave your husband and marry me or else.
Whatever the answer, it proved fatal. And in a final tragic twist, it seems that Stephanie's life was ended with her own weapon.
The same type of ammunition that was found in her apartment was used to kill her.
Even though the evidence is circumstantial, the jury convicts Wayne of second-degree murder.
If we hadn't found her body, he would have never been prosecuted. He'd have been free.
And it's game over for Guidry.
He'll be staying in prison the rest of his life.
Stephanie Pepper Sims has finally been laid to rest. And for the citizens of West Monroe, things will never again be as right as they once were along this river.
Oh, it makes me cringe.
Yeah.
First thing I think about is my child.
I'm glad he's caught, like you.
Me too. Whew, what a day. We were blessed with a beautiful body of water, weren't we?
I'm telling you.
And like these waters, the memory of Stephanie Pepper Sims will endure. Every year, a new class will take their first cautious steps onto the Louisiana Tech campus. And when it comes time to burn the midnight oil, the bright lights of a new computer lab will beckon, dedicated to the memory of a young professor taken too soon.
Absolutely.